guess, been trained by God to really notice his voice in certain ways. And one of those ways is, to me, it feels like a kind of like a butterfly floating around you that just catches your attention over and over again. In this case, it's the thought that pestered me was, would you take his place?
This is Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God, those moments when heaven and earth collide, and we see God. We see his hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention, inviting us into a closer relationship. Here we share stories of encounter with angels, divine intervention, prophetic dreams, visions, near-death experiences, big and little, God incidents. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. Welcome. Glad you're here for episode 106. We begin this episode with an interesting question.
Would you take his place?
Would you take his place? Whose place? His place, her place, anybody's place. Would you take the place of somebody close to you who was dying? Well, who are we talking about? Pick a person. Spouse, would you? Brother, sister, mom, dad, a child of yours, would you take their place? A week ago, I received a draft of a book being written by a friend of mine named Pam Lile. And she just wanted some feedback from me on this book. A couple of years ago, Pam was asked that question. Would you take the place of? Would you trade places with? Who asked the question? God. How soon after that did the Samuel incident take place? Sam?
Only a couple weeks later.
In church, in this incredible encounter moment with God, Pam was asked this question. The question really got me thinking, and it's going to get you thinking too. Oh, and then there was a follow-up question. It gets even deeper than that. I'm just going to let the conversation roll and watch where it goes and watch where it takes you.
Hey, Trapper.
How you doing?
Oh, good. How are you?
Very good. And your husband and your 47 children are all great?
Every one of them. They're all good.
Oh, sorry, only 8. Sorry, only 8. And a 9th on the way.
Right.
Wow. When are you due?
October, mid-October.
Okay. Then you got the baseball team. So when you and David were getting married, and everyone has that conversation, how many kids would you like? How many would you have? What was the general consensus?
Oh, we really initially had the idea that we wanted to be open to children, and we didn't really put a limit on it from the beginning. But I don't think either of us really contemplated what that meant. I think we had expected 4 or 5. We just didn't realize they would come quicker than that. So we kind of grew into the idea, I guess you could say.
Wow. Look at you. I thought maybe, unless you think we should start someplace else, maybe we start on that day when you felt like maybe God was getting in touch with you about a bargain. You want to start on that day and where you were and what happened?
Sure. God had been leading me on a journey for, a good 3 years by that point, and just kind of drawing me in deeper and deeper into my spiritual life with him. And it ended up that he was leading me into daily mass with him. And at this point in my life, it was the first experience where we had a brush with tragedy. My dad had prostate cancer, and we were just kind of waiting to hear how bad it was. It turns out he had 2 different kinds, and they were very aggressive, but we were waiting to hear if it had moved to his bones or his organs. And so I did what I had been doing, and I found myself in church really seeking some consolation. And from my past experience, God does meet you in Scripture. And typically it was very consoling words, but on this day it was 1 Peter 4. And it said, "The end of all things is near. Therefore be alert and of sober mind so that you may pray. Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins." And it just, I don't know, it wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting consolation and peace and just to feel better about the whole situation. But instead, the reading that day at Mass really kind of blindsided me. So after Mass, I stayed for a while and just spent some time in conversation, and I guess been trained by God to really notice his voice in certain ways. And one of those ways is to me, it feels like a kind of like a butterfly floating around you that just catches your attention over and over again. The small little thought that catches your attention again and again, those are the ones that I always pay attention to. And in this case, in my restless thoughts, the thought that pestered me was, would you take his place? After I noticed it a few different times, I decided to stay with it and kind of test myself, like, where was I in my relationship? Could I, with God, that is, could I make that sacrifice? And the conclusion that I came to was it wasn't for lack of love for my dad, and it wasn't for lack of love for God, but just because of, I have children that depend on me, and I didn't see how me making a sacrifice in his place would be any easier on anybody in the family.
Did you really think that this was not just your own mind wandering around? You felt this was from outside?
I was just kind of in the moment. So I don't think I really considered. Usually it's after the fact I go, huh, what happened? Was that me or was that him? Or I start to second guess things. But in the moment, I just talk and listen. And
I think we've all kind of had that, would I switch? You know what I mean? If you love somebody, you go through that, would I take that? Had you had that experience before? Because you have a lot of kids. So when they get sick, have you had that sense of, I wish I could take that flu from you, that kind of, on a smaller level, obviously?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely with my children, for sure. It's more of an organic, like on a natural level, like, gosh, I would take your place in a minute if I could, But this was more of an idea that I don't know, the God moments are more surprising. Like they seem to catch you off guard almost. You can't really trace the lineage of where the thought came from. And that's what this felt like. It was kind of from outside of myself. And so I just kind of went with it.
Okay. So you decide that no, in this particular case, because of the kids, the family, no.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you think it's done at that point?
I wasn't ready to leave the conversation, but I just, in that moment, kind of understood. I had a peace within me. I didn't feel like God was going to be angry at me for saying no, or because it was all out of love. I mean, if it were only me in a heartbeat, I would say, take me instead, but it was out of love for my kids, for my husband. I wasn't strong enough to say, and I realized in it that there was a lack of trust, but that's where I was, and probably still am in my spiritual journey, is just out of love for others and consideration for others. I can't say I trust you enough to take my life instead. And so I just kind of sat with it for a minute, and then there was a little pushback, and it was, would you allow one of your children to take his place? And that one did. I don't know, that that one did surprise me. That one kind of caught in my throat a little bit. And my first instinct was just, what am I even considering here? This is crazy. But it seems to me that there are threads in our spiritual journeys where over the course of time, you can kind of follow it and recall things, ways that God has communicated with you in the past, and then connect it with where you are right now. And one of those threads was the story of Abraham. And it had been months before I had a conversation with my sister about how tough that story is. We discussed about how it was a foreshadowing of God's sacrifice of his son. In the story itself, you have to go back and think, like, what was Abraham thinking? Yes.
I'm just thinking it was a real interesting conversation coming back down the hill. That's what I'm thinking.
Sure. Right. But, we can look at it from this angle and say, oh, here's why God did it, But in the moment, what could have been going through Abraham's mind?
It's crazy. It's crazy. Now, I have heard some different things about this. One is that we see pictures, and sometimes we see Isaac as being just a little guy. And he couldn't have been, because he was asked to carry wood up that mountain. So if you got wood on your back, you gotta. So most people now seem to think maybe 17 years old, somewhere around there. So he obviously was also of the age where he could say, Dad, you're 99, whatever the heck he was. I mean, Abraham was old. I can outrun you. I can outfight you. So there had to be a surrender on Isaac's part after whatever conversation they had that, okay, yeah, strap me down and just, do whatever you got to do. He could have gotten away. He could have gotten away.
Right.
So he also had to be in agreement. Otherwise, he could have gotten away. And the other thing I've been hearing lately about from more theologians is they will say, well, Abraham had been told, you will have more descendants than stars in the sky and sand on the beach and all this kind of stuff. And therefore, if that was to be true, then Abraham must have believed that God was going to resurrect Isaac as God ended up resurrecting Jesus. So there's that in there as well, that maybe that's what the theory was. Okay, son, I think you're coming back. But what a crazy conversation that had to be.
Right. And an incredible amount of trust.
It's all trust. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's all crazy trust.
Right.
But bottom line is you hear that and you say, no, you're not taking one of my kids. No, right? I mean, wasn't that kind of a knee-jerk? There's no way.
Right. It was, very much a knee-jerk at that point. But when God at that point then called my mind back to that conversation with my sister, and I could see the thread and connect it to that moment, it occurred to me that God asked the same from all of us. We're all called to offer him our family and everything in our life, which includes our children, not just in the good things, but in everything. At the time, I was expecting our 8th child. And, of course, you're in love with them right away, even as you're anticipating their arrival. But when I contemplated, would you allow one of your children to take his place, I couldn't bring myself, of course, any more than I could bring myself to say, sure, take me. I could not say I would offer one of my children in his place. I could not do that. The most I could do, and it is a little bit beyond understanding at this point. I don't even know how I came to offer this. But the most I could do at that point is to say, the only thing I can offer at this moment that would be painful, everybody, but would be primarily my cross to carry, would be to offer my unborn baby. Nobody else knows him yet. They'd, of course, be devastated, but it would primarily be my cross. I know him, I sat there with it for a little bit, and I kind of woke up from this conversation a little bit and kind of shook my head, and I'm thinking, what in the world am I even talking about this for? But in kind of a not my will, but thine moment, I just stood up and I said, I won't go back on my word, but please don't take my baby. And I just made the sign of the cross on my stomach and I walked out of the church.
But bottom line, again, being is that you don't believe this was just a conversation with yourself.
I don't. I've wrestled with it for a long time. I don't know that, so like a half hour later, we received a phone call that there was in fact a silver lining. The cancer had not spread. And my dad would have to, go under surgery, but prognosis was very favorable. So, I can't speak for God and say that was the direct result of any kind of an act of surrender on my part. But, I mean, considering that in the body of Christ, our suffering is redemptive, and things that we suffer, they do have a direct impact, although we may never know what that impact is, but it does impact the entire body of Christ. And so to say that perhaps our suffering, the merits of that directly benefited my father, I don't think that's completely out of the realm of what is possible.
I'm much more familiar with people bargaining with God. If you heal me, God, I promise to sing your praises from the mountaintop. I'll go to church every day. We've all heard those promises. I've been around people who do that. If you do A, God, I'll do B. And so I'm certainly much more familiar with that. I've seen people do that. And I thought, this is all kind of interesting. And it's like, and I'm reading the book and you're, as you just did now, and you're stating this, would you do this? Well, would you do that? And I'm just kind of thinking, these are interesting questions, and I know you well enough over the last year to know that you're a very faithful person. You're your family. You're about God. That you have your daily conversations with God. You've had your signs a million times over that there is a God and interacting and all that. And I just kind of went, okay. And then this morning, I wake up to a song. And as you know, songs bubble up in my head seemingly out of nowhere, and we know where that nowhere is, and we spiritualize the lyrics. And the song parallels your book. The song is called Would You? It's called Would You? And I'm going, wait, what is this song? And we had it on TCM recently, or just last couple of days, Singing in the Rain. Gene Kelly, Debbie Reynolds, Donald O'Connor, and all that. We're watching this old movie. Well, one of these kind of silly little songs kind of thrown in the middle of this whole thing is a song called Would You? And I'm waking up to this tune, and I'm going right immediately to you and your story and this sense that it wasn't just an inner conversation with yourself, that God was saying to you, well, would you do this and would you do that? For whatever his reasons, I'm waking up to the song, and Singing in the Rain has 5,000 songs in it. I mean, they're always singing. And here's this one song, Would You? And I finished your book several days ago, and it's like, what are the lyrics in this song? So I look up the lyrics. Like I say, it's kind of a silly song, but when you spiritualize the lyrics, the song is about you and Jesus. And the lyrics say things like, he is holding you. So you're kind of sitting back, and it's like Jesus is holding you, Pam, and he is singing your praises. And and you guys started out as friends. You were friends, but now he is kissing you with a sigh. And I'm thinking, wow, this takes me to last week's episode when I was talking about Catherine of Siena, because she talked about the 3 stages of a relationship with Jesus. At his feet, when it's basically fear of God, judgment. That's when you're at the feet of, you don't want to sin anymore because there is judgment and there is fear of God. Okay, that's the beginning of a relationship. At the heart of Jesus, which is a real relationship, this is where there's something going on. There's interaction going on, and there's the beginning of friendship going on, and what you're really feeling are the benefits, the blessings of being with Jesus. But when you get to the mouth and the kisses of Jesus, St. Catherine's saying that's when you enter into something very special. This is where with great love comes great suffering. And if you look at the cross, for example, and you see all the love God, Jesus had for us to do that, and has for us to do that, and also how much suffering that he had to go through. And you're at the mouth, you're at the kisses of Jesus, you're at that level of the relationship. And so all of that went through my mind this morning as I'm going, would you? And I'm looking at the lyrics of the song, and I'm thinking to St. Catherine of Siena, this isn't just coincidence again. This is how God speaks to us, and that he actually wants us to entertain the concept that God would even enter into this conversation with you, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And here's God to me saying to me, no, talk about it. And wherever else this goes, go ahead, talk about it,
Right.
It's so I think it gives great credibility to perhaps, a very great perhaps, he was there, and perhaps he was merely saying, check your relationship of how much trust you have in me. It could have been a check your level of acceptance, of trust, because we are now crossing over into kind of a special place.
I definitely see that moment, for whatever it's worth, as far as, whether the merits directly impacted my father. Regardless of that, I do see it as a turning point in my relationship with God. Up until then, it had been very, I don't know, almost like a honeymoon. I mean, like we were just, I couldn't spend enough time with him. He was very clear, but in that one moment, it was like the very beginning of him asking me to surrender.
How soon after that did the Samuel incident take place? Sam?
Let's see, only a couple weeks later.
And what happened?
So a couple weeks later, my then 8-year-old son, he ended up having a ruptured AVM.
What is that?
And
Explain that.
So an AVM, it's a tangle of blood vessels, and it was in his brain, and he was born with it, but we didn't know it was there. And one moment he was fine, and the next moment it ruptured, and he was unconscious within 3 minutes. And miraculously, he survived, but we spent 73 days in the hospital with him. And so he went in for life-saving brain surgery, and he essentially stroked out the whole right side of his brain. And we've been on that road ever since. So that's been about going on 2 years ago now.
Because he basically lost everything.
Yeah, he went back to to square one. He was in a coma for a while. He had to learn to talk again, to breathe again. He completely emerged as a newborn infant all over again.
He's 10 now, or around there?
Right. Yeah, 10.
And ever since then, he has had to strive to get everything back.
Yes. Yeah. It's been a very long road. We're still in the middle of it and still working to recover things that were lost. His left side is still, most of his deficits are on his left side. He, has a compromised gait when he walks, and he doesn't use his left hand. There's a lot to be grateful for because Sam, in his essence, did come back to us. But he has a lot of limitations that we're still working to overcome.
Right. And you've been around the country trying to find him help and all.
Right.
What miracle number one, talk about miracle number one in terms of what you found out later, the odds were that he would get through it. What had to be in alignment for you to still have Sam?
We had just arrived home from vacation just 2 days prior. And so on all accounts, we should have been playing in the ocean or on the road, traveling. But we had just arrived home, and he should have had this happen at some other time. Maybe when I was out running errands or getting groceries, or if he was just outside playing out of earshot of anybody. But he ended up going unconscious right after we returned home from vacation, and, not 10 minutes after Dave arrived home from work. And he went down right at our feet. And so we could get him immediate help. And so that thought really, it was manna. It gave me the ability to say, there you are, God, and to trust that he had it in his hands, that it was all under control.
And when you got to the hospital, you called 911. They come grab him, go to the hospital, and generally speaking, is the kind of doctor who could even help you there at any just given time?
One of his nurses reached out to me and just explained how they were in conversation with the neurology team, and how they were explaining how they just never see anybody survive a ruptured AVM without neurological devastation except for Sam. And the reason is when that happens, you need immediate help, and you need to have a neurosurgeon there at the hospital ready to go. You need to have an OR suite ready. You need to have an anesthesia team ready. And the stars just never really align that quickly. And but it did for Sam. It was miraculous.
Was it one of your doctors? Didn't one of your doctors say just 5 minutes? Just 5 minutes difference in getting him here, and everything being in alignment, and you're having a different conversation.
She did console us with that thought. She said even 5 more minutes and we would have had a very different conversation.
Amazing. So God made sure, he made sure, I mean, talk about an act of God. He made sure that you still have Sam.
Right.
Generally speaking, on this podcast, we talk about these incredible God incidents and these divine interventions that certain things happen, conversations with angels appearing or doing certain things, or it's phenomenal through over 100 plus episodes, the incredible experiences real people have been having. Then along comes Pam Lile. Now that you are at the mouth of Jesus, things have changed a little bit. You're away from the heart where it's all the blessings and the benefits and the good times and all that. Now you have entered into this area of trust me like you've never experienced before. True?
That's true.
And it's bumpier now. It's beyond Sam, isn't it? It's just like everything is bumpier now.
It is.
Talk about that.
Yeah, I found that God has become perplexing, and He still sends manna, and I still hear Him, and He sends me many, many gifts. But overall, the journey itself has become very rough terrain and oftentimes confusing. And so, from my past experience, I can trust that I'm hearing Him correctly, but He seems to really find keeping me in the middle of the journey to be incredibly beneficial for me because He's not bringing me the consolation so quickly anymore. And He's not leading me to the end of the journey so quickly anymore. And I understand that the long and strenuous journeys are where the growth happens. And so I can understand why, but I have found Him to be incredibly perplexing. And my walk with Him has become a little like I'm blindfolded. He's still sending me manna so that I can trust Him, but yet I can't look ahead to the end destination with any kind of anticipation because He seems to continuously encourage me along these long paths. In my experience, he has promised me healing for Sam. And so I trust Him. I take Him at His word. I believe Him. But yet it hasn't happened yet, and we're 2 years out. And so at a certain point, He has asked me to surrender so many times to the outcome, to surrender so many times to the not yet, that it has created an entirely different relationship with Him where I do keep walking, I keep following, I keep trusting, but I don't, I no longer have my eye on the destination. I just keep my focus on Him and on the manna and on the journey and the good that is coming from that and the lessons that are being learned without focusing too much or hanging my hopes too highly on the destination.
As you know, people always have advice. People always have advice, right? And it's like,
Right.
oh, if you want Sam to have a healing, and there's like, you just need to check these boxes, right? Because that was their experience. You just need to pray to Saint so-and-so, or you need to surrender more. Yeah. Have you forgiven everybody? And they go through the checklist, right?
Right. That part of the journey ended up being quite exhausting on me because you're already, your whole life is a prayer at that point. And well-meaning people, they're very well intentioned, but it began to feel like I had to come up with the magic cocktail of how to manipulate God in order to get this healing for Sam. And
you just had to find the right cocktail, right?
right. And our friends, the saints, they're a great treasury. They're a community. And it felt like they were being reduced to magic charms that if you just pray to the right one, or there's a lot of power in this one, or did you try that one? Like almost like you're collecting cards, like baseball cards, do you have this one yet? Did you try that one yet? And I don't know, it was really kind of frustrating for me to really maintain my center and my focus on, we don't manipulate God in order to get an answer. We can ask and we can receive, and that's about all we can do. So standing on your head and working yourself into a proper frame of mind and scrupulously looking at your past to see if there's anybody you possibly haven't forgiven. They really are approaching His mercy in a very superstitious way. So I just keep trusting and hoping and asking.
Yeah, because the saints are there interceding for us. Ultimately, it's all connected to God, I don't think it matters which saint you pray to.
Right.
If you I connect with Mary, you connect with, is it with Saint Therese, Little Flower? And
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
like, one is going to get, no, I'll trade you 2 St. Anthony's for it. It just doesn't work that way. About 20 years ago, and when I was coming across, healings and all this kind of stuff, and I thought, I even knew when my healing was going to happen. I was so sure, because I checked all the boxes. Yep, surrendered. Yep, did that one. Forgiven everybody. I was checking all my boxes, so this weekend should do it. Yep, should get my vision back. Yep, blind guy, no more. All right, this weekend. I mean, honest to gosh, I was telling people at work on Friday, can't tell you what's going to be true on Monday, because I know this weekend, there's going to be a healing service, and just crazy. But you get that mindset of, you've seen miracles, and why wouldn't I? I've checked all the boxes. They haven't checked half the boxes that I checked, and they got their healing, so I'm a shoo-in, So,
Right.
So you were trying cocktails, right? You were trying cocktails.
Sure.
And there's God and you, and as you said, you just got your hands out going, whatever you give me, it's all from you.
Right. And that was even part of the journey. I mean, initially, gosh, after we'd attend a healing service, I'm sorry, I've got a baby screaming.
There's one of them. How old's that one?
That one's 1.5 years.
Oh, there's a fun one.
Many hands comes in handy.
Oh, yeah. Well, thankfully, you have some of them older now, so they can do some of this stuff. Yeah.
Right. I would take Sam to these healing services, or even just pray in my own home. And, every time I was told no or not yet, it would take me a good day to recover from that. It was almost like I was getting my heart broken again and again and again by my God, who I love so much. But then over time, I realized that in this too, I had to trust that he was exactly where God wanted him, and that if the answer was not yet, I needed to be okay with that. If I say that I surrendered to him and I trusted him and I had faith in him, then I had to prove that again and again and again when my prayer went unanswered.
One of the things, and I love how honest and raw you are in this book. You mentioned how sometimes you felt, as we all, and I think everyone's felt this at time, where, okay, God, you want me to open this door here and go down this path, okay, because there's something there, and there's a dead end. And it's like, wait a minute. I could have sworn that was God saying go this way. And he's not promised, and here's the thing that we're learning here is that he's not promising that that's the end of the destination, but by the time you get to the point where you go, wait a minute, I just ran into a wall, hopefully you have more trust and you're closer to God in trust and acceptance of everything that comes from him. And is that kind of your experience? What's your experience in going down dead ends?
Yeah, I'm finding that the journey is where it's at, and it really has very little to do with the destination. And he does seem to take us on these paths to nowhere, seemingly, or into walls or off of cliffs or whatever you want to say. But it's all to really take your mind off of the destination and to go back to that surrender and that trust. And I think a lot of people, when they hit those walls, they can say, oh, well, perhaps I just got it wrong. I wasn't hearing him clearly, or maybe even considering that you were even discerning spirits wrong and in following the devil into some seemingly good path. But what I've come to understand is that's only because he sees a tremendous amount of potential in you. And if he takes you on journeys and leads you down paths that go seemingly nowhere, it's not because you got it wrong. It's not because you didn't discern correctly. It's just because he's drawing you into a deeper surrender.
And wants you to shine more because he knows you can shine more.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. But in the meantime, when you hit the wall, it's like, ow.
It sure is.
Yeah,
it smarts a little bit.
And I mentioned to you, I had a real owie over the weekend, and I gave God a good talking to over the weekend. Let me tell you, and he had it coming. Let me tell you. And just a quick sidebar here, because I mean, for weeks, For weeks, I'm creating videos, and on the podcast, I'm talking about, I love the miracle of the holy fire, as you know,
Right.
where fire comes out of the stone, where Jesus was laid in the tomb. It happens every year. It's happened every year since the church began. Over 1,600 years, every year, there's fire that comes out of the stone. And nobody knows about it because, well, that's a Greek Orthodox thing. That's not my faith thing. So so it's not being shared. So my whole thing was I felt I was being led to talk about, of course, the miracle of the holy fire. And I was. But where I took the leap, if you will, and thinking that I was getting a sign on this too, was that this was going to be the year it didn't happen, because the lights were off in the churches because of this virus, and the lights were off there and the doors were closed, and this was going to be a time to get our attention. The lights would not come on in the tomb, if you will. And that's what I've been saying for a month, because I kept getting a number of signs, actually. One of them had to do with this one particular song. Bottom line of the song is that, yes, Trapper, you're out there on your own on this. You're not going to get any support on this, but yeah. So Saturday morning, I'm watching, online, Jerusalem and the Holy Fire, and the patriarch goes he's in there like 5 minutes, comes out with a fire. I mean, fire, and I'm going, whoa, wait a minute, and I'm going, wait, God, where did some of us go wrong here? And then I reanalyzed this particular song, and it was like, oh, you're out there on your own. And hey, dummy, you're out there on your own, and it has nothing. You're on your own, stupid. And so what he did was what he could have done, what God could have done, seeing the incorrectness of where I was. He could have sent me another song to correct me. He could have sent me any other sign, and he didn't. He sent me for weeks this same song that was telling me I was wrong, but I'm thinking it's telling me that I'm right. He let me walk off the cliff. He actually let me walk off the cliff, fall into a whole pile of eggs, which are on my face, and I'm just going, oh, well, I like eggs, but, and so for the next 24 hours, 36 hours, I'm kind of like, hey, God, all you had to do was give me one little sign, and I'd have gone, oh, I got this wrong, and you let me walk off the cliff, and I'm upset. It finally hits me. Because there's always a reason why God does what he does. And in my case, in a biblical word, I was stiff-necked, hard-hearted, because I had my own agenda that I wanted that message to fit. I've created my own agenda for God, and God's going, no. and he's just let me walk off the cliff. And so he let me. In order for me to sit back now, to be more trusting the next time of making sure in my discernment, do I have all the elements right? Am I looking at that song right? Did I get this? So he's saying in his own way, you need to be listening to me closer. This isn't about your agenda. This is about my agenda. Your agenda was to publicize the miracle of the holy fire, which you did. I never gave you the agenda of saying that there wasn't going to be a fire in there. I'm not giving you the gift of prophecy. You just failed that, and so, yeah, I'm going to let you walk off the cliff. So once I realized it was me, it wasn't him. It was me, and he was trying to expose a weakness in me. At that point, I was finally able to say, okay, I'm sorry. It's all me. That night, I got a dream. Bottom line is, within the dream, there's a symbolism, and God, as he always does, knowing our hearts, went, and you're forgiven. Now go and sin no more, basically. Pay more attention next time.
Yeah. I also don't think he misses an opportunity to teach us humility. And
oh, baby.
Even, I don't know, whenever I think I have God figured out, he always shows me that I indeed do not.
It's all a test. Yeah. Kinda. Not to make it mean. He's not mean, but do you think God's mean now?
No, not at all. I've come to, because I've also found that to be in conversation too, just how could a loving God, in our own household, we've had those conversations. How could a God who loves us do this to us or allow this to happen? And, it can't be that Satan won. and we're just waiting for God to save us from it. We had to find the love of God in the cross. And we really did. I mean, we've been witness to all the good he's brought out of it, and everything he does, we understand it's for our good. And this life is so fleeting. It's just everything rightfully points to heaven and to eternity. And if we can look at everything through those eyes, then you see that all these trials and all these tests and these long roads, sometimes to seemingly nowhere, they're all about preparing us for that reality.
You know, you put something in one of your emails to me that you need to put into the book, and it has to do with Saint Therese, because she was the one you were quoting when you said something about, God. I wrote it down. What was it?
Oh, was it if this is how you treat your friends, it's no wonder you have so few of them?
Yes.
Was it Saint Therese?
I'm almost positive it was Little Flower, Saint Therese. I think she was the one to say, okay. If this is how you treat your friends, no wonder you don't have that many friends. But here again, this is an honest conversation with God, as she wrote it in her book.
Right.
And that's what you're doing. You're writing these thoughts in a book because this is your reality. And God wants us talking about it. He wants us. Here's the deal. I heard such a great story today. Apparently, it's a famous story. Maybe you know it. I just found out about it today. Has to do with, I don't know where this was, a woman walks out of this hospital. It's a Catholic hospital. And there's a big statue of Blessed Mother Mary there. And she walks over to her and she stoops over and digs her hand into the landscaping, into the dirt, picks up a dirt clod and flings it at Mary. Have you heard this story?
No.
She starts throwing dirt at the Blessed Mother Mary. Security sees her and starts shooting towards her, and they're stopped by a nun to go, no, leave her alone. It's okay. She's praying. And I'm going, that's so good. That is so good. She's praying. It's absolutely true. Where are you with God? If you're angry, be angry. He can handle it. It's not a place you want to stay, but that's prayer.
I mean, like I said, every time Sam wasn't healed, there was a lot to work through the next day, but you get better at it. That's part of the growth.
Talk about your consolation along the way. What have been the moments where you have really seen God, the God you wish that showed up a little bit more often?
Yeah, and it's like little sparks of hope that would be sprinkled about, and it usually came within one message that was sent to me, but it would come to me randomly through different people, or a Bible verse somebody would suggest to me, and then another person would suggest that same exact one, or it would be in the scripture reading for the day, as confirmation. Interestingly, like the sky, it's all 73 days in the hospital, it was like God painted the sky for me, and there were rainbows all over the place. And people would send me, messages of, I was praying for Sam today, and look what popped up over my head, and there'd be like a double rainbow. I'd be on my way home, and the sky would just have the most, truly glorious sunsets where people would be outside of their cars taking pictures of the sky. And it was all I could do not to stop and say, that's for me.
I love
days when I would be like a mixture of hope-filled, but incredibly sad for some reason. Then I would drive home and I would find the sky would be perfectly beautiful above me, but yet I'd have these raindrops on my windshield. Yeah, and those continued long after even the hospital. But I found on the days I was sad, the sky would be sad as well. In fact, it got to the point where I would wake up in the morning and I would see this dreary drizzle in the sky, and I would immediately get a little downhearted because I knew it would most likely be a rough day, and it always proved to be the case. So yeah, and even the gifts in the cloud formations. Oh, one in particular, there were 3 times in a row when I was driving home, and this beautiful sunset, it would be in my rearview mirror. And when things happen more than once, I start to, of course, pay attention. This one day in particular, I remember looking in my mirror, seeing the glorious sky behind me, and I was just thinking, why is it always in my rearview mirror? I want to see it. And it couldn't have been 2 seconds later, my little Julianne in the back, she goes, "Hey, Mom, you know what?" And I said, "What?" And she goes, "God's behind you." And I said, "He is." And she goes, "Yeah, he's whispering in your ear."
Oh, that's
Like
sweet.
she's only, 3 years old at the time. I mean, I don't know, just little forget-me-nots, little love notes just sprinkled about.
One of the bigger yeses has come with an old friend of ours from Blind Faith Live podcast, a podcast that surrounded the miraculous stories of Dr. Isam Nami. I thought it was cool what happened in there when he just came out and kind of put his hands on different people and, on the family members
Yeah.
and cool stuff. So, I mean, you got a nice sign there as well. Did anything happen that night? Did you go once or more with Sam to his office?
Oh, he's been there several times.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the first time was...
Oh, the bladder thing was huge, wasn't it? That was huge.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like God healed our family in incremental steps. Like the same appointment where Sam's bladder was healed, Dave was healed. And then beyond that, our family was healed. And then our marriage. I mean, we were fine, but we were stressed.
Oh, yeah.
And then the final appointment where we brought the whole family in, it was just one blessing after another, and physical healings, but probably the bigger picture was our family was healed. We kind of figured out how to love one another again and how to live together again, and just be united and connected once again.
Yeah, beautiful. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. I'm still receiving the manna. I'm sustained by the manna on the journey. It keeps me going, and it helps me to stay in a hope-filled posture. But he's just calling me to a little bit of a deeper surrender, a little bit of a deeper trust without...
Explain what that means.
To me, it feels like you're kind of walking in the dark, but you trust in where you're going. You know where you've been, and you can see that he's still there because he still sends messages of consolation that are more along the lines of keep going, keep trusting, keep hoping.
Do you cry more?
Yeah. It's... Oh gosh, I can find myself in so many stories in scripture now of, like probably my favorite would be Joseph, where he has this dream that one day his brothers will bow down to him, and he trusts God, he takes him at his word, and then God does this about face, and he's sold into slavery by his brothers, and how many days and nights passed as he's sitting there wondering how God's going to make sense of all of this that he promised him. And in the end, God does make sense of it, and his word doesn't return to him void. It actually comes to fruition. But keep walking, you keep journeying, even though you really don't know how he's going to make sense of all he's promised. You trust that he will. He said it, so he will.
When did he say it to you?
Very early on, when Sam was still unconscious. And there had been a steady stream of priests and visitors that had just anointed him and blessed him and spoke life to him. And I mean, it was from morning till night, just all these visitors. And the verse for that day, the reading, concerned Abraham. And it just, this one little section said, because of the faith of Abraham, his son was restored to him. And there was just kind of an inner knowing in that moment that in some way, I didn't know what it would look like, but in some way, Sam, in his essence, would come back to us.
This book is going to be read by believers, and when it's all said and done and published, we'll have you back on and we'll talk about it. But this book is going to be read by believers, but believers are all at different stages in this. Some are at the foot of the cross, some are at the heart, some are at the mouth of Jesus, different parts of the relationship. And some of them are going to look at what you've read and go, people talk to God like this? People are this constant conversation going on all day. And then there are other people going, yeah, so what's different about this story? You know what I mean? Everyone's at different levels and
Right.
different stages of this. And anybody who's a believer and wants to grow in their faith is going to love this book, because you're just
I
at
hope so.
the gut raw level of I love God. It's real. It's not just, faith is not a straight line.
Yeah.
and he's drawing you closer, and he sees how brightly I'm telling you, you have an impact in that church. They love you there, and everything that I don't know how you do it. No. You have 9th on the way, and you're so involved in your church and all these other, I have no idea how you do it. You don't sleep. And I guess I want to add, I think I already know the answer, but was there ever a time in all of this where you just got so upset and so banged into a wall that you just wanted to say, sorry, Jesus, I'm going the other, I'm out of this. I can't handle this.
I don't think I never really got angry at God. I was hurt a lot and I was disappointed and I was confused, but I was never angry at him. I felt like I loved him too much at that point because my relationship with him had been so strong leading up to it that I couldn't be angry at him.
Well, this has been delightful. Different. This is different. I loved it. I love this conversation. Thank you for this so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks again, Pam. Let's go back to the initial question. Would you? Would you take his place? Would you trade places with? Would you sacrifice one of your own children? Because a very similar conversation took place before time began. The all-knowing God, looking at the DVR of what was going to happen and the need for a Savior, the Father saying to the Son, would you take their place? Would you die for them? And the Son looking at the Father saying, yes. And then saying to the Father, asking the Father, would you sacrifice your son? Yes. Very similar conversation. And then let's go to Abraham and Isaac. Would you sacrifice your son, Abraham? Yes. And again, picture 17-year-old Isaac. He's got to be on board. He has to say yes, too. They both have to agree. And they both have to be so trusting and accepting of God's plan that both of them have to say yes. And then an interesting thing happened on the altar. God altered the plan. And Isaac walked down that mountain whole. Now let's fast forward to Pam Lile, where she's sitting in a church. Before her is an altar where sacrifice is offered. Only this time it's Pam being asked, would you sacrifice? Would you take the place of? Would you sacrifice one of your children? And she's going, unborn? How about the unborn son? And God alters the plan. And it's Sam, age 8, who somehow miraculously does not die, plan being altered. He miraculously is saved that day, and he too is walking down the mountain, but he's not yet whole, which means, Pam's right, he will be whole. He will be healed completely. And along that road down that he's walking, he's bringing people with him. He's bringing people to Christ with him. Now let's look at the song again, Would You? Because actually, when you look at the lyrics, the question is for us, me and you. Would you, in looking at that relationship between Christ and Pam, would you like that relationship? Would you like to be up at that upper level, at the mouth of Jesus, at the kisses of Christ, at this, it's a marriage. Thick and thin, rich or poor, sickness and in health, whatever happens, happens, and you just roll with it because you accept everything in this relationship with Jesus Christ, including the confusion that comes with it, but being so trusting that you just keep saying, okay, where are we going? I don't get this. What? There's a wall. There's a cliff. Okay, I'm going to keep coming. I'm still with you, Jesus. I'm not leaving. And it is would you want this relationship? Would you say I do to this relationship? Because that's the question. Would you? That is the question for each and every one of us in our relationship with Jesus as we go from the foot to the heart to the mouth and the kisses of Jesus Christ. Acceptance of everything. Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Pam and Sam, the Pam and Sam Show. Thank you so much. And the book, once again, we'll give you a heads up. I'll give you a heads up when this book is available. You're gonna love it. You're gonna like. It's got some punch to it. It does. God has heard. Full name is His name means God has heard. All right. Thank you so much. Oh, need your story? Touchedbyheaven.net. And if you feel blessed by these episodes and would care to bless us with monthly donations through Patreon, you can go to this episode 106. Just look for Patreon, click through, or go to patreon.com and search for Trapper Jack. Thank you so much. My Patreon shout out this week goes to Heather Strassel. Thank you so much, Heather. And thanks for listening, everybody, to this episode of Touched by Heaven. I will see you next week here at Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack.